Welcome everyone to another Platinum Sponsor Get to Know You session. We've got 4 of these throughout the week, and I hope you take the time to watch every single one of them, because ultimately without these Platinum sponsors, CommCon Virtual 2021 wouldn't have happened. It is quite that simple. So spend your time and get to know every single one of them. So today we've got Daly with us, and Daly kind of came to me not late in the day, but later on in the day than our other Platinum sponsors, and said, Dan, we really want to take part, and we really want to get involved. So what do you say? And normally we only have 3 Platinum sponsors at CommCon, and I was like, we usually only have 3. What do I do? And I was like, no, like Daly, they're contributing back to open source. They're doing all the right things. And I really wanted to get them involved. And so I went off to all of the other Platinums and said, Daly, like, is this okay? And they all came back and said, absolutely. So I'm very happy to have Daly join us. So today I've got Quinn and Varun from Daly with me. And before we get going, I wanted to say that Daly are going to give every person that's watching this stream $250 for 3 months. And that lasts up until March. So if you don't start it until the new year, then you'll still get it. There's no pressure to kind of get it now and then like you lose a month because of Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever your holiday is. You can get started in the new year, at which point you get the full value of it. So thank you very much to Daly for that. So hello, Quinn, and hello, Varun. Thank you for joining me. So I guess first off, for anyone that doesn't know who Daly are, I mean, where have you been? But can Quinn, can you tell me about Daly and where it got started and what is Daly about?
We're a WebRTC platform for developers. Our customers are people building all kinds of different web, mobile, embedded applications. We want to provide really terrific global infrastructure and then really flexible core video and audio APIs. And then on top of that, really great pre-built user interface components so that people can work at various levels of the video stack to build a whole huge range of new, exciting, interesting things. And thank you for having us. We're really happy to be here. We always want to be participants in wonderful communities like this. So we really love everything all the other sponsors are doing. We have a few engineers doing presentations that we're really excited about, people giving us feedback on. So thanks.
Good. So Varun, you've only just joined Daly, most recently, and with the fundraising round as well. So I guess a leading question is why did you join Daly? You were at 8x8 before because of the CallStats acquisition, and now you've left 8x8 and you've joined Daly. So why is the most simple question.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I will tell you, I wrestled with it for almost half a year, not denying that. So, like, my background is in WebRTC, been doing this for, 16, 17 years. Built CallStats, was Google Analytics for real-time communication. It still exists. I think the main thing that I saw was, I think when we started WebRTC, we wanted WebRTC to be big. And it was big, it was growing. And then the pandemic came and it basically did what we wanted to do with WebRTC in 2012, 2013. So we were waiting for this to happen. I think all the waiting just meant like a lot of preparation, like a lot of companies were built. There was all the CPaaS vendors that came before, right? Like Vonages and the Twilios and such, and then Agoras. And basically, the pandemic was an inflection point. The first 6 or 12 months of the pandemic was just like, I think the bottom line story across all WebRTC products is that no one slept for 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 a long period of time. Like we all did hyperscaling, we all saw the world change, we saw our work come to fruition in some form. We all felt proud about it. We were exhausted. The new year began. We hoped that the vaccines would roll out, things would become slightly better. We would go back to work and like in workspaces. Some of that has happened, some of that hasn't happened. And video has just grown. Like the things, the kind of use cases that we thought we wanted to build, like we wanted the world to build, did not happen in the 5 years preceding the pandemic. And in the last 18 months, a lot of those, like events grew dramatically. You can see IoT stuff come out. Healthcare education, which were languishing in some form of like, I do not want to build something because like regulations or how do we get people to change their behavior. Pandemic changed the behavior in some sense. So the simple answer to the question is that the world changed. I saw call stats at a point where it was already doing very well. We grew 12x in the 18 months. 8x8 is a really good home for it. They are using it both internally, it's growing externally. There's a roadmap, it's all being built out. And it will, the thing with call stats was always that was a secondary service. You had to build WebRTC to actually use call stats. And it kind of worked for the first 5 years before the pandemic, mainly because a lot of the people who were experimenting, the experimentation was not like at stellar speeds, right? People will build, go off, look at the market. Now everything is at stellar speeds. The use cases have changed dramatically. When we built call stats, there was no, like Docker was new, Spark and Storm were new. Like people were still trying to figure out how to do stuff with the web for UDP, like sending traffic over turn servers in Amazon did not mean that Amazon's rate limiters would sometimes cut you off, right? So it didn't matter like if you had a good congestion control or whatever. Sometimes like some policer would come and like kick you off and you're like, no, it sucks. And then you go talk to all these vendors and try to fix. A lot of those problems got fixed in the last 6 years, especially in the last. So exciting thing now is the world has changed. There's a bunch of use cases to be built. Like a lot of people are building them. There are a lot of upstarts. There are companies like Daily is the one which has been building this with a lead start before the pandemic. And for me, it was just like, I worked with Quinn. Quinn used call stats since 2016. So we've been in touch for a long time. And we've basically exchanged notes over the last 5 years, like regularly. So when Quinn reached out in the summer and said like, hey, we're doing this, we're going bigger, this is the roadmap, I would just say, like we had lots of these conversations, like going back and forth. Almost at one point, we were just doing weekly calls, just catching up. And it just made sense at some point to do this.
Right.
I had other offers, not denying that. And it just feels like, do you want to do something that is at an upstart, can have a lot of impact, or you could have, let's say, money and some impact. And then if you weigh those two things, like people will choose different things. I chose this. I feel like we're at a point where we can contribute vastly to society and to our developer ecosystems and to WebRTC, not just like Daily, but I think we're talking about WebRTC v2. We're talking about like, how are we going to break up the WebRTC pipeline, give it more control. We're all talking about VASM. There's so much happening that feels like being at the forefront, being at a company that can take this forward was super important for me. And right. Quinn and Nina have been fantastic. So, I've known them for 5 years, as I said. So, made it easy.
Excellent. Sorry, go on, Quinn.
I mean, just from our side, Nina and I have really admired Varun for years and years. And, when we started Daily is not our first startup. I've been doing video and large scale network stuff for a couple decades now. Just really love working on this stuff. And when we started Daily, it was a bet on video in general being the future of most of what we do on the internet. And WebRTC in particular, we thought the WebRTC ecosystem was one of those big technology efforts that a whole bunch of interesting stuff would cohere around. And from the very beginning of following WebRTC, we've known about Varun and admired his work. And as he said, we were CallStats customers. So when it was actually Nina who said, probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something, we really need to just try to see if we can convince Varun, that what we're doing at Daily is potentially an interesting home for all of the kind of vision he's had over the years about WebRTC. So we had a lot of slow motion conversations about what we wanted to do and what we wanted to contribute to the world and the kind of company it's worth trying to build and the kind of team we're all interested in trying to be part of. And we're really lucky that he joined us.
Sweet. Good news. So, I mean, a lot of what Varun was talking about is part of my journey over the past 2 years as well. Like, I didn't have a product to sell. I had me to sell as a consultancy, and like there were parts of the pandemic where I think I was doing 75 hour weeks, like, and just for me. And when you're at home with a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old, and most recently a newborn, it's mad. And that's something that we've all had to kind of shoulder, not just in our industry, but in lots of other industries as well. But then also, you guys wouldn't have seen it yet, but in my Hello CommCon talk that I give at the very beginning of CommCon, I've got a slide that shows CommCon's traffic, the YouTube channel's traffic. And like I said, how I was always fine with it being very low, because that wasn't the point of CommCon. The point of CommCon is residential conference, getting people together in person, and the videos being on YouTube was just like an added plus. But at the beginning, like March 2020, like there was just this sudden increase. And looking back on it now, you go, well, that's what that was. But I wasn't looking at stats every week because it didn't bother me. And then they stayed high until like July this year, August this year, where it started to come back down because we're coming out of the pandemic, vaccines, everything else. So I'm really hoping that we have a CommCon in person, a residential conference next year, hopefully, if everyone can get their act together and stay safe and everything else. So we'll see what happens next year. So I guess that leads me on to Daily. So you've got lots of offering, and for me, what's the coolest thing about Daily is being able to get started very quickly. Like you don't necessarily have to understand all of the concepts around WebRTC. You can get started very, very quickly, especially with your pre-built stuff. You can almost, as far as I understand it, you can almost just embed something straight into a site, and 99% it should just work. So for me, that's super exciting because, as we all know, hiring within the WebRTC space is almost impossible. To find a good WebRTC dev that is available is almost impossible, and that in itself is probably stunting growth and innovation within this space. So I guess a question for you guys is, whoever wants to take it, is where do you see the next kind of, not innovation, but you know what I mean, like what needs to happen next to help this whole industry kind of grow a bit more? Because as Varun said, we were all expecting this to happen back in 2012, 2013. I was doing talks at Signal Conf saying WebRTC is ready. Like ignore that it's not a spec yet. Like just it's ready. Go build stuff. And people didn't. So what's your viewpoints on where to go next? I can see Quinn like nodding and smiling, so I'm going to go to him.
We do think expanding the population of developers who can be successful with real-time audio and video is the challenge. And one of the really fun things and one of the challenges about this task we all have is there's a huge range of use cases that are starting to really grow now. And so building plumbing, we think of ourselves as a plumbing company in a lot of ways. Building plumbing that supports a lot of use cases is a kind of one axis of that challenge. So you've got one-on-one calls for example, telehealth, And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got these large hybrid experiences like, say, a fitness class, where you might have 10,000 people in the experience in some way, shape, or form, but increasingly people want to have a social element for small subgroups in that experience. They want to live stream out for distribution to other platforms like YouTube Live. They want to record. So there's a lot of moving parts, and building a coherent set of APIs, really terrific infrastructure that supports that whole range of use cases is like a really fun product design, engineering, marketing challenge. The other piece of it, though, sort of goes the other way, if you can kind of follow me along on my axes geometric metaphor. You have to build components that make it easy for developers to use video without knowing, as you said, all of the details of how it works all the way down in the stack. And so our pre-built UI, our UX components are an attempt to make it really, really easy to get started for the broadest set of use cases we can kind of make it easy for, so that you can learn as much about video as you want to as a developer, but you could also just focus on your own product and we make it just work. And that's a moving target. We're going to get better and better, I think, every time we push code at making those pre-built components support more and more use cases more and more elegantly. But that's how we define it. Plumbing and then going up the stack to provide really great abstractions.
I mean, I've been amazed by, I guess, the different industries that are starting to kind of go, oh, this WebRTC thing. They don't even know that it's WebRTC, right? They just go, oh, we can get media from A to B sub-second, and like it's super responsive. Like and we've got people doing surgery over WebRTC now. Another one of our sponsors, Subspace, are trying to make that even better by enhancing routes between places. So yeah, to a degree, I can always see avenues of where WebRTC could be going. It just takes a global pandemic for people to suddenly go, we could do this, and we could actually, save people flying around the world and adding to greenhouse gases and everything else. Like this technology that exists today, and it is continuously evolving, has a big part to play in that future. So I guess my next question would be, what's Daily's plan for helping drive that future, especially now that Varun's on your team? Where do you think you can help prod people into going in the future? I'll leave that one with Varun for a minute.
All right. So the thing that I believe, which is adjacent to like having very good APIs that can take you from building a very simple app or a very complicated one, and probably using just the same APIs, not totally changing the APIs, is like to look at it as a developer's time to value, right? So how quickly can developers get to their aha moment? Now, the aha moment can be accelerated by simpler APIs. That's what our belief is in that. So three concepts that we have is call object, which is like the lowest level API. And that's an actual API, and you basically build everything, the whole user experience on top of that call object. In that case, you own the whole UX by yourself, and you use the lower level objects to manipulate the audio and the video. And of course, the idea there would be that if you take that 1-to-1 and go to 1-to-1000, that API should be fairly simple. Like you say, this is 1-to-1, or 1,000 people can join the stream and I'm still. So from an object or from an API perspective, you should not have to worry about simulcast, SVCs, any of that stuff. So you basically try to take that complexity away. So that's like one component of time to value, because just removing that complexity or giving them some tools to like control that complexity is another thing. But like very simple, here 20 minutes, you can go from 0-to-1 and 1-to-1000. And then when you have call quality issues, you can like start to manipulate that. That's the lowest level. And then the second level of APIs that we call is templates or components. And these are React components that that there are UX elements that you can actually play around with, which have the underlying call object with it. And then the biggest one is pre-built that you talked about, where it's fully templatized, right? And you can think of that as like WordPress. So you could have a blog which has like comments on the bottom, comments on the right, upvoting, whatever. And then we would have like these remixes of templates. So we could build some templates from the components as a standard template, like we have today, the Zoom method, like you have like one person and then all the band, like the ribbon or like Brady Bunch or whatever we're calling this today, 50 people on a screen. You can swipe left, right, and you can see the next 50 people. So there's so many use cases that you could build. And if you make it very simple for them to like manipulate the UI, makes it super easy. The other access is, so one is time to value for the developer. The other one is call quality. By making it super easy to go from one-to-one, peer-to-peer to SFU, AV1, VP8, VP9, which codec should I use? Like all that, if you take it away from them, you make the best choices for the developer. They don't have to go and do anything. They can, of course, go and override it and such. So that's the complexity that you run into, is like when you make smart decisions, make it easy for them, it solves like 70% of the use cases. And then there'll always be 30% of the people who will say like, I don't want to use AV1. I want to like, because I'm on IoT, I want to use H.264 because I get hardware acceleration. I'm on a Raspberry Pi, all that stuff, right? So like we want to allow both aspects of those worlds to converge on daily and be able to do all that, hopefully using the pre-built or like the pre-built templates, components, and then remixing them. And when you go down that path where you want to do some custom work, then you dive deeper into our docs.
That's probably been, for me as a consultant, that's probably been the biggest kind of freshness of it all, has been the fact that older CPaaS types, you get an SDK and that's about it, right? So like if you know that, so I won't name names, but if you know that both ends of a call is an iOS device or even a Mac device, then why not use H.264? Why not force the use of H.264? Because of hardware acceleration. And instead, like, don't use VP8 and up until now you haven't been able to use VP9 anyway, but don't use VP8 because you're going to burn your hand because your phone gets red hot. And to be able to fix those problems in those SDKs meant going in and actually changing code in the SDK that ultimately might break the next release that you get given. And ultimately, we need the greater flexibility that you were just talking about to be able to do right by our users and customers and everything else.
So glad you mentioned iOS, because it's one of the things we always talk about in enterprise sales with customers who are trying to build video for the first time and trying to evaluate like what the moving parts are and what the options are and what the cost-effective approach is going to be. We all love Apple devices and iOS. We all in the WebRTC world spend a lot of time trying to make sure that our stuff works on every possible device, and iOS has its own quirks.
I could literally talk about Safari for 2 hours. I feel bad. I feel really sorry for the Safari team, because from what I understand, they just don't have enough manpower to wrangle everything. But at the same time, when we get a release with something very, very broken that we can't go in and try and fix, it's incredibly frustrating, isn't it?
It really is, and it's been supporting iOS through various releases is something that we, to the silver lining on the challenge is that we think it's a value add we can provide for our customers, because we go all the way up the stack to a very high level of abstraction. When there's a release that has workarounds required, we can usually fix them in a way that's completely transparent to a large number of our customers. And the 15.1 release really recently had a bug. I think all of us scrambled to work around it. We could fix it in our pre-built UI by disabling H.264, as it turned out, when in some previous releases we could use heuristics and force H.264, as you were just describing. turns out that on 15.1 devices, you need to disable H.264. We were able to do that for our pre-built UI customers. We were able to do that for most of our call object customers as well, the users of our lower level APIs. Because when I think one of the things, as Varun was saying, if you have the mindset that you're building these abstractions that rest on each other, and you're trying at every level of the stack to think about developer time to value and to think about sensible defaults. And if you just write a few lines of code, will it do what you want it to do for 80% or more of the use cases? So we try to build at every level of the stack with that in mind, not just the layers of the stack where we draw pixels to the screen. So almost all of
And
it. Yeah.
this is where a CPaaS really shines, right? A good CPaaS really shines. Ultimately, a lot of us in the industry have been kind of scrambling for H.264 crashing tabs or just low quality, low volume audio, audio coming out of the speaker of the phone, the head speaker of the phone instead of the speaker. Like all of these, and I feel like I'm picking on Safari because there are lots of other issues with other browsers as well. Trust me. But most recently, these have been the things, and so a lot of us have been scrambling for this, and this is the power of a CPaaS. Ultimately, mostly you can kind of fix it for 99% of your customers, and then also help the 1% of customers that need your help.
Well, I'll pick on Chrome too, because one of my favorite stories about getting to know Varun a long time ago was we had found a bug with get stats in Chrome that caused tab crashes under certain circumstances. And we were pretty sure we'd narrowed the bug down to using get stats and just a it was a race condition internally somewhere probabilistically. But if you did it, we could run a repro case that over a certain period of time would always crash a Chrome tab. And we hadn't found anything about it. We'd posted about it publicly, but hadn't really gotten any kind of engagement. But Varun, who has lots and lots of data and also lots and lots of experience using Git stats, so we reached out to Varun and said, are you seeing this too? And he said, well, we are seeing something that looks a lot like that. And we traded the repro case back and forth until we were both sure we'd seen exactly the same thing. And then Varun, I think, elevated the visibility of that bug to get it fixed in the next version of Chrome. So we all write software. We all know that there are regressions, experimentation, new features that have corner cases. So being able to solve as many of those as possible is, we think, a core value proposition. And the other thing we think a lot about is sort of how do you build a durable business model that's great for as many customers as possible. It's sometimes helpful to look at companies that are a few years farther along on the growth curve. We have a lot of friends who are work at Stripe or have worked at Stripe, and we've thought a lot about kind of what Stripe did really well in payments for a few reasons. One reason is because we think the market and the impact and the customer pull and the use cases for video and audio are approximately as big and important as the use cases for payments. So building a payments company at scale feels like it has to have good lessons. The other is we feel like Stripe did a really lovely job with this multi-layered architecture where you can get started with payments really well and really quickly, no matter kind of what your developer background is, like whatever language you prefer, whatever platform you prefer, whether you're working in use case specific environments to build an online store, or whether you're building some very custom payment flow for a use case that maybe the Stripe developers themselves didn't even have in mind. And that architecture of having really elegantly designed, beautiful, functional, evolving components that can solve a lot of problems for you that you don't even know as a developer exist, and then all the way down the stack where if you need to engage with Stripe's retry logic, you can understand what they're doing with the retry logic and you can tweak it for your customers and your use case. And if we solve problems kind of with that mindset, we think we're going to, on balance, be building in the right direction.
And again, like I've built with Stripe recently for Broadcaster. There'll be another session about that. But you don't need to understand EU VAT, for example. You kind of need to understand it from a we need to be able to collect this kind of information because of this. But past that, no, Stripe take care of it for you. And so daily good CPaaS type people should be doing exactly the same thing. Like people don't need to know how to read get stats, right? Because Daily does it for them. Like, I hate get stats personally. I hate RTC reports. Yeah, I wish there was a really nice way of just being able to being told, yeah, Dan, you've got some packet loss. Like, you should do something about it, and this is what you should do. And I haven't found anything like that other than hiring Varun to tell me. Yeah, I mean, so I think that kind of is bringing us to the close. And I really want to get some live Q&A from people that want to use Daily or have heard of Daily but don't know enough about them. So I think I'm going to wrap up here, and we'll move to Q&A. So I want to say thank you to Quinn and both Varun as well. And don't forget that Daily are offering everyone $250 a month in credit for the next 3 months for all CommCon attendees. I'm reading it off a thing. Offer expires at the end of March 6th. So yeah, redeem whenever you want. Don't feel the pressure to do it over any religious holidays or cultural holidays or whatever. So thank you very much, both of you. And I will see everyone else in a minute. Cheers.
Thank you.
Hello, it's me again. Anyway, so I've got Quinn and Varun here with me tonight. So welcome back, Quinn and Varun, even though we literally only just saw them 10 seconds ago. But we're tight on time, but I wanted to pose a question looking into the future. And I guess I'm going to go to Quinn with this first. As we move out of the pandemic, air quote, hopefully, what are the kind of movements that you're seeing within this space? Like, what are people driving you as Daily to implement, to do that's going to help make their lives easier?
Well, we think a lot about use cases and then kind of technology plumbing that supports those use cases. I'll just talk about the use cases briefly and then let Varun talk about tech. So one of the things we're seeing a lot of is people trying to figure out how to go back to some kind of working in person, but it's very different for most companies than it looked like before the pandemic, and there's going to be a long transition period. So we have a bunch of interesting stuff going on in our world about what hybrid work should look like. You're partly at home, you're partly in an office with people, or maybe you have a team that kind of spread out all around the world, but you have some centers of places where people are working from. So you have like small offices that all add up together to make a company. And I think there's a lot of really interesting thinking going on about what hybrid work looks like going forward.
That's a cue for me. So technology-wise, like I think what we're seeing, and we've seen that in the last 6-8 months, is the size of the calls have been increasing. Right? So we've seen calls go from maybe 10 at max, or commonly 10 like 2 years ago at this point in 2019, to go up to 50, go up to 100, some going up to 100,000. Some talking about how many subscribers are there, how many publishers are there. So 50 publishers, 15 publishers, or 150 publishers. And there are different use cases for this. So events might have more, like this one, you could have a lot of publishers, but also a fair amount of subscribers, like all the way up to 1 million subscribers if CommCon successful. So I think that gives us a lot of room to go beyond the traditional SFU style, where you just have one. You start thinking about hybrid styles now in that case, in terms of topology. So you could think of a tree, and you say, oh, I want to just create peer-to-peer networks, and you do something like Peer5 or someone like that, where you get media from upstream, or you do live streaming like HLS or Dash5 or something along those lines. And in between all of this is the creator. So trying to figure out how do you get seamlessly your video from one or more people curated seamlessly and delivered seamlessly, right? So there's a lot of seamlessness now in these statements. but and typically you could do it with 3 or 4 different APIs or companies or vendors. And the question is, are these Lego blocks, or can one vendor have all of them? I think that's what we see for ourselves.
Right.
I'm laughing because our colleague Ashley is asking in the chat for you to ask us who the very best and favorite person of everybody at Daily is. So obviously we have to say it's Ashley since she asked that very hard question in the chat.
I mean, Ashley's session in a couple of days' time is truly a remarkable one, and I really enjoyed filming it. But back to the question at hand, it's remarkable to me that we could even be talking about having 100 people in a room, 150, 1,000 people in a room, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's just ridiculous." But there's another session later on in the week from the Jitsi team and talking about how they did it and why they did it. And then you start looking into it more and more and more, and you go, "Oh, there are valid use cases here." Sure, you don't want 100 people all talking at once, but there's 100% a reason why you might want to have 100 people who can easily talk all at once within reason. And that's truly it's a difficult problem to solve, but also it's completely different from the norm of even 2 years ago. So it's how everything is moving forward. So that's us for time. So thank you very much to Quinn and Varun for taking part in this fireside chat, getting to know Daily, and truly Daily have been one of the best sponsors in terms of helping us getting everything that we needed and wanting to be actively involved. So thank you very much to Daily.
Thank you.
And yes, you should absolutely take advantage of their offer of credit, and don't feel obliged to use it straight away. So thank you very much, and we shall see everyone in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.